Hello, and welcome to Street Aesthete. This is the show where we explore street view coverage of a noteworthy location, looking out for beautiful architecture and stunning scenery while I amuse myself by remarking on what we see. And in today's episode, we are returning to Belgium. We're going to be looking at a city just east of the capital, Leuven. This is a place known for its 15th century university, one of the oldest in the region, and it is home to the Stella Artois brewery. We're going to start off by the station and walk into the centre. So we begin in this open square with quite a lot of interesting buildings to comment on. Generally over to our east in the direction of the station, where the newer part of the town is, there's not too much to comment on. Lots of this blocky, ugly fare. But as we pan around in the direction of the older part of the town, now we start to see some more beautiful and recognisably Flemish architecture. My guess would be that much of this was built around the late 19th and early 20th century. A beautifully proportioned neoclassical facade here, with the characteristic red brick of the region in between, and a whole collection of gorgeous gables. As I've said before in this channel, something that's just wonderful about Europe is the cafe culture, and there's nothing that pleases me more than to see the awnings out the front of the buildings, with people enjoying a coffee or indeed a beer on a sunny day like this. And in fact, some of the curved shapes of the windows here are definitely much more reminiscent of the 1920s and 30s. It's worth bearing in mind that though this town has over 1,000 years of history, it was very badly damaged during the First and Second World Wars, and so much of the architecture we see here may in fact have been built after the wars. But fortunately for us, the architects have very much kept in mind the design principles of classical architecture, as well as harkening back to the vernacular Flemish style, which we can see very much in evidence here with these beautiful gables and the characteristic red brick. And on the whole, a very stunning place to start our exploration of Leuven. And we shall proceed west into the town centre. This sort of building here, I would say, is generally quite a common style to find in Belgium and the Netherlands. The colour of the brick generally helps it to blend in with some of the older buildings, but more recent generations of architects have sadly neglected to decorate the tops of their buildings with the gables that I crave. Something I also always enjoy seeing is the red brick interspersed with the much paler limestone, creating this striped effect, which is very attractive indeed. Leuven is also famous, besides its brewery, for being the home of Gerardus Mercator, a renowned cartographer after whom the map projection, the Mercator projection that we still use today, was named. And speaking of beer, we have already seen some Stella Artois advertising around the town. If you're not so keen on a lager, then the beer Lef is also made at the breweries here. So blonde beers, brown beers, and many other styles are also on offer. although I think that the Leuven Abbey may be a little bit further south in the country, more in the French-speaking part. And indeed, Belgium does have a most admirable tradition of beer brewing. It's home to the Trappist beers, brewed by a particular order of monks who to this day use the traditional methods that they've been using for centuries. But besides beer, Belgium, I think, really is a place where some of the world's finest architecture can be found. There's just so much to see down this street, interspersed with newer buildings, it must be said, but liberally sprinkled throughout, with an almost casual aplomb. And as the sunlight hits the buildings here, it just looks marvellous. So many attractive curves in the balconies here, mirroring the curves that we see at the tops of the buildings in the gables, the curves around the windows, the curves below the balconies. Absolutely gorgeous. It's a real treat. A real treat. And we can just begin to see, at the end of the road here, the Stadhuis, the town hall for which Leuven is also famous, and we will be approaching it, don't worry, but I'm going to take you off on a slightly circuitous route in order to approach it from a different angle, because there's a particular money shot that I want to share with you, and indeed indulge myself with. So we'll just take a quick glance down this street and then we'll be turning off to our left. A little bit less interesting down this street, it must be said. And we proceed now to another open square, where we can see the wonderful University Library building. Quite a lot of the buildings we can see around this square are a bit newer, and there's a good reason for that. We'll see if we can get into some coverage where we get a better view of the library. And here it is, the University Library building. Now, the original library, which would have been built in the 15th century, was destroyed during the First World War. A replacement was built in the intervening years, and that too was burned down during the Second World War. And so this is the third iteration of the library that we can see here, and a very grand building it is indeed. We've got a veritable forest of these little dormer windows up on the roof here, the lovely series of arches creating a shady arcade, a highly ornate and decorative gable here in the middle, and a fabulous tower to top it off, which is a little bit out of focus, so we'll see if we can find a slightly different picture. Alright, we're going to get a slightly different view to the one I imagined, but we'll probably get a better view of the tower from here. Yes, indeed we will. Although still a little bit out of focus, low fidelity. Nonetheless, we can see the many stacked layers at the top here. And we'll just take a moment to admire the town from above. Definitely a place where you don't want to be straying too far outside of the centre for fear of running into ugly tower blocks like this, but definitely in the core, and here's the street we were walking on earlier, there are lots of beautiful buildings to admire. And had we proceeded down that street, we would be coming to Sint-Pieterskerk, and we can just about make out, though very blurred, the Stadhuis there. So we'll be making our way over there before too long. But for now, I'm going to take you back down to street level to somewhere about here. So if we turn ourselves around, we've got another wonderful view of the library here. And there is, I think, our first instance of the Belgian flag. Great to see it flying. And the sides of the library present yet more of these wonderful bricked gable facades for us to enjoy. Here the old, or the relatively old, meets the new, and although these buildings are far from the most beautiful that we have seen so far in the city, their colour rather more bland and uninteresting than the lovely red brick that we see elsewhere. It has to be said that they have at least taken some cues from the shapes of the older buildings, the configuration of windows perhaps, the way the upper story has a different, slightly darker hue, not unlike the roof slates that we see on the library here. And another Belgian flag there. It's always good to see on the Street Aesthete channel the national flag of the country we're exploring in evidence. Belgium is a bit of a peculiar country. It has at various times been part of France, part of the Spanish Kingdom of the Netherlands, and it's a country very much divided by language and population, the northern part of the country being Flemish-speaking and the southern part French. And so I think it's often difficult for people unfamiliar with the country to discern what the Belgian identity is, but to my mind it's actually very distinct, and it's got a great deal to do with the architecture. Belgium has the architecture that I would say most closely resembles that found in London, my hometown. It certainly takes many of its cues from neighbouring France, see the dormer windows, or indeed the neighbouring Netherlands, see the Dutch-style gables. And while you'll certainly see brick with high iron oxide content, which gives it this beautiful red hue in London and in the Netherlands, in general, Dutch buildings tend to have a slightly darker brown hue. And isn't this just a fabulous street scene? I do love pedestrianised areas like this. And it's wonderful how this building in the centre divides the street in two, and we've got two very inviting directions to take. On this occasion we're going to be taking the right path. Shame about this building. It really feels as though each one of these gables is the head of a different character standing shoulder to shoulder. And indeed, each of these buildings, though there are similarities between them, has something distinct, something unique about it. Just as no two people are alike, no two facades here are alike. And quite often on older buildings we'll see these hooks on the sides. I'm uncertain whether these are decorative or whether they would have served a particular purpose, perhaps for winching things up into the higher windows. But given that this was probably built in the 1920s, this building, were these perhaps decorative, but aping something that would have in older architecture had a function? And a splendid doorway here. So at this point we're going to head off of the street and see if we can't join back up with the original road from the station where we began. What an interesting fellow. We rejoin our original street here. And it just has such a pleasing effect to see a whole row of these very beautiful buildings, all with similarities in their configuration, echoing along the row, but with ever so slightly different elevations to the windows, different shapes on top. Just so pleasing. The effect somewhat spoiled, it must be said, by this rather bland construction on the end. It's a shame it couldn't have been something a bit more like this. But never mind that now, as we begin to approach the Grottemarkt, the Grand Market Square, which is just over here. Again, some newer constructions that are definitely taking cues from the older buildings of the town, and we've even got a few protruding windows set back slightly from the top, giving this row here something of a continuity with its gabled neighbours further down the street. And what a fabulous building we have here. I really love all these Gothic spires on top. And this is Sint-Pieterskerk, which was built in the 15th century, around the same time as the university and the Stadhuis, which we can just see the edge of there. I'm not going to spend time looking at it just yet, because I want to take you on a slightly different path to view it from another direction. I've been thinking about the approach to some of the grander buildings in this city and the best way of first encountering them. And I hadn't planned to go down this street, but I think we might make a bit of a detour, because it looks very attractive. The sides of the street here framing the church wonderfully. a really wonderful town with all of these pedestrian streets. You could wander around on foot for hours and never stop seeing beautiful buildings. And here we've got a really great example of a classic Flemish step gable. Opposite these very characterful facades here, and we won't proceed any further down here, I don't think, because we're starting to get into a higher density of newer, not so attractive buildings. So we'll see if we can rejoin the street where I originally intended. It's funny how Belgium and the Netherlands are known for having extremely flat landscapes, but Leuven does have quite a few slopes within the town, like the one that we've just traversed, and indeed it's a very gentle slope, but in the context of Belgium it practically amounts to a mountain. And we come up right against the side of the kirk here. This particular tower here, I think, especially distinguished by these extra little turrets on its dome, which gives it that classic jagged Gothic look. I'll confess to you that I've lost the route that I was following, but I've got a fairly good idea of where we're going. And at the moment I'm just really exploring and enjoying the buildings that we're finding. Interesting, this one here. At a distance, it looks almost as though the timbers of this facade might be painted on. Difficult to tell. But it makes, I would say, a welcome change from the general style of buildings that we've seen elsewhere here. And because this is such an old town whose layout grew up organically in medieval times and older, there are so many of these lovely passageways and back streets to explore, though very few of the original buildings are preserved. The spikes on either side of this gable here give this particular building a rather impish look. But yes, I was going to say this one does look quite a bit older, 1691. This brickwork we can see a slightly less saturated red, and perhaps the bricks are a little bit smaller. In London, I know that smaller bricks are generally older bricks. I don't know if the same holds true in Belgium. Just a great row of step gables here. Really gorgeous. and unusual for this city so far. Some lovely woodwork here, the decorative eaves. This almost reminds me of the Street Aesthete channel thumbnail. But that picture is from Ghent, also in Belgium, which is the first city that I explored on the channel. And this is the street that I wanted us to be on. I love the combination of the greenery of the leaves here and the red brick. We are heading in this direction, but I wanted to head back down this street a little bit in order to take in the whole row of facades. And now, at long last, as promised, I'm taking us back to the Grote Markt. And I hope you're ready for this. I'm about to give you the grand reveal, the money shot. Here it comes. Here is the Stadhuis in all its glory. But this video has already been running for quite a long time, so we're actually going to pause here and we'll return for part 2 of our exploration of Leuven, in which we're going to be taking a closer look at the Stadhuis, the Oude Markt, the Old Market just round the corner, and the Beginhof further south in the town. Thank you for watching all the way to the end of the video. Since you've made it this far, why not subscribe so you don't miss part 2? If you've enjoyed the music that you hear in this video, then take a look at my first channel, which is where I upload all of my original music.